Okay, so I think we're live. Again, or as always, it does take like 5 or 10 seconds for it to show whether or not it's going live on on our end. So if you can hear us, hello. If you can't, I am talking to myself because Henchbrain is fixing his YouTube on his end. So hey, it's going live. Hello. Hello. Okay, you're fixing it, have you?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Right. So,
so we were going to try and be more academic this time. So I'll simply go, yes.
Is that your academic voice?
Yeah, that's Professor Henchbrain logging in.
Professor Henchbrain. Okay. Okay. Right. Well, I guess let's get rid of the pre-stream image. Here we go. Right. So, as
can everybody hear both of us?
Oh shit. Okay, right. Good. Again, it is behind by quite a lot, so okay.
Yeah, I'm assuming everything's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
We've got a yes from Kezbox.
Hey, Kezbox is good, by the way.
We've got another yes from Neff. Yes.
Yeah. Let's fucking go.
Let's do this.
What was that?
Kind of giving it a bit of a death metal vibe up top.
Yeah. Yeah, and Kez, yeah, the chat delay is lots. It's a known thing with YouTube, apparently. YouTube streaming, Twitch streaming is like basically instant, but YouTube, like, I think it like scans every message before it sends it through. So yeah. Anyway, so I guess we all know why we're here. As the title does say, it is the end of the Smud Boy arc, and we have.
So sorry, Kezbox says, "Don't interrupt sheep plugging me, you fuck."
Brilliant. Okay, goes up to Kezbox over on Twitch and on YouTube. And Twitch and everything, they're good.
Honestly, you give these people mod powers and they start mouthing off to you.
Okay, so as I say, so basically we had a bit of a run-in. Senpai noticed us last time we were streaming. He did come in at the end of the stream, so he didn't get an opportunity to have him on. But I think he was rather upset that we called him a useful idiot. Oh, you called him a useful idiot. I agree.
Yeah, I'm upset that I called him a useful idiot, and yet it's you who's getting all the attention.
It's because you're not on Twitter. You need because to be fair, like he did basically just ignore us. After
yeah.
After that, and then I atted him on Twitter deliberately, trying to rile him up. Which I was successful in, and I did like make a whole like 10-minute video about it. But basically, he's very, very upset, and he's very, very easy to upset, and also he's a 40-year-old man. So he's 40-year-old man who has certain opinions on
Sheep in the Box. I need to correct you straight away, destroy you with fact and logic.
Yeah,
Smudboy is at least 40.
Okay.
He may be older.
Okay, right, fair enough. So he has now started ignoring me. I think he's muted me on Twitter because I think he tweeted some like shit like pronoun joke, and I basically just quote tweeted him and said, "Sir, you are 40 years old," and he just ignored it. Which, going by previous interactions, he seems incapable of ignoring people if he sees tweets mocking him. So I think he has now. He hasn't blocked me because he doesn't want me to be able to get the screenshot. But I think he's either muted me or he is just deliberately ignoring me.
Yeah,
which is fine. But anyway,
do we want to discuss the what was said over Twitter, or are we just going to leave it at that?
Yeah, so basically I called... I worked out that Smudboy was never going to come on to the... onto the stream, because obviously the stream exists in order to mock him. which would have
Well,
been...
hang on. The stream exists to mock, for the benefit of Kesbox, who missed the first two of these. The CHUD Book Club exists to mock the poorly written literature of many of the internet's finest fools.
That's correct, yes, of which he is.
We kind of started with Smudboy because I think we know the most about him, but we've got some other people that we want to dig into.
Yeah,
Lord of Patriarchy, for example.
Yes, Lord of Patriarchy is definitely one of the ones in the running for sure. But yeah, basically, we realised he wasn't going to come on for obvious reasons. Where we sort of expected that. So, in order to deliberately piss him off, I atted him and said, "Looks like Smudboy is a bit of a coward and has removed himself from the marketplace of ideas," which really upset him. And he then went on a whole Twitter tirade where he was going on about how I didn't have manners and my parents didn't raise me right, despite the fact that on his...
Which, to be fair, is a very 40-year-old response, right?
That is a very middle-aged man thing to say, yeah.
Raise you right, boy!
Yeah, no, so...
Oh, hey, Riot Fox is here, but only half listening, which is fine, but...
Yeah, one guy was watching us whilst jogging, so I mean...
Yeah, that was Roy, I think.
That's very strange, yeah.
But I'm just shouting out Riot Fox, the ever-faithful Riot Fox.
The ever-faithful. But yeah, so he got really pissed off with me, and I was just trolling him, and he didn't really get it. And then like he just went off on one, and I don't think he really realised how much I was deliberately trying to get a reaction out of him, and succeeded. So he basically just embarrassed himself.
Again.
It was very funny, considering the hypocrisy, because of obviously everything he says and does on his...
Yeah, the video that Sheep put out earlier in the week of, what was it called? Dear Smudboy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, some of that, I helped research that, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, no, you were... Well, obviously you're an unironic Smudboy fan, so
yeah, and it's completely unironic. Yeah, and I'm also the lead researcher of the Sheep in the Box channel.
Well, for that video, yes. Yeah.
For that one video, yeah. Although to be fair, if you ever want me to do pointless deep dives whilst I'm bored at work, I'm happy to do that.
Well, you did say you were thinking of setting up your own channel to do something like that. I don't want to steal your thunder.
Yeah.
We could discuss that at some point.
Yeah, it's because the thing that the chat needs to understand is, whilst I am interested in all this stuff, I am an incredibly lazy person. So running an entire YouTube channel, this is what I like about streaming, is that it's essentially quite low effort on my end. I just have to read the book and then talk about it. That's it. Like, I don't even have to edit the video or anything. It's just done.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, but yeah, so anyway...
I do just want to make the chat aware that, unlike in previous sessions, I will be getting drunk. I've already started on the adult beverage. Currently drinking a Newcastle Brown Ale, if they want to sponsor us, like Robinson's Squash do. That'd be good.
Yeah.
I'll keep you abreast of the beer situation as we go on, because I've got a few next to the old streaming chair.
That's good, yeah. I think at this point, because of the hilariously pathetic interaction we had with Smudboy, we've basically just sort of lost all pretense of giving a shit about him. So
yes. And to be honest, it's also because, I think on some level we've said all there is to say. This is just kind of going to be Kesbox. Nuki Brown is okay, I suppose. Yeah, look, the thing about Nuki Brown is that I started drinking it when I was 15 years of age, and therefore it is kind of it's a standard tipple for me, you know. It's not the only beer that I'll be drinking today. And to be fair, the beer is kind of in honour of Smudboy as well, because he's an ale fan. He's a fan of
ale, yeah.
Yeah, he's a big ale fan, so I've got a selection of the UK's finest offerings by my side. So if he does jump on, I'll let him know what I'm drinking, and he can give me his thoughts. Anyway, sorry, Matt. I'm already throwing you quite far off.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, so basically, all I wanted to say is that since we we had that interaction with Smud Boy. It was very funny because obviously on his channel he almost entirely just is incredibly just awful to other people. So we thought that was quite funny, and it looks like he's not going to come on. It is very sad because we were hoping to talk to the author himself and ask why he made so many embarrassing decisions in the process of writing this book. But it does appear that Smudboy has removed himself from the marketplace of ideas, and he doesn't want to.
We destroyed him. We destroyed him with facts and logic.
He has been destroyed with facts and logic, and it looks like the man is not going to be joining us, which is sad. But
I would just like to say, well, before we get into it, regarding the Twitter drama, the accusations that have been slung at us that we're, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but we are discourteous, dishonourable gentlemen. Bearing that in mind, I would like to retract my statement that Smudboy is a useful idiot. It was wildly inaccurate because he's actually completely useless. So I'd like to say he's a useless twat.
Excellent. Excellent. Anyway, so we should probably preface this.
That's just in case he's lurking. I'm trying to lure him out with disses.
Brilliant. We want to just preface this by saying we've decided to take a new format because originally the idea was that we do Smudboy shtick, which is doing everything line by line in a sort of EFAP kind of thing. But we decided we're quite bored of that, and we've said all really what there is to be said within sort of that format, and it's getting a bit boring. Like last time, we basically just went on a million tangents just because we stopped really like caring as much, and it's not really as interesting as sort of making an argument. It's sort of a bit boring. So what I've done is I've actually gone through and I've
there's somebody called Shit Literature in the chat, which is appropriate.
Oh, that's very apropos.
I will also say, Kazbox, I also like a good Bateman's ale. Carry on, Matt.
Okay, no. So basically what we've done is we don't know how long this is going to be. It's probably going to be longer than previous streams. But basically we've colour-coded. Well, I've gone through and colour-coded it.
Sheep's done all the work this week.
Yeah, so unlike usually...
I've taken the day off.
Yeah, unlike usually where it's you who's read the book and sort of you're taking me through it, we've sort of switched. So essentially, just so you know, pink is stuff that I think we should talk about, or that I think would be interesting. Yellow is basically just like stuff that might be interesting but isn't essential to talk about on stream if we don't have time. And then blue is just incredibly weird or nonsensical metaphors that he's made.
It's going to be a lot of blue. Yeah. Shall we get going then?
Yeah, let's go. Let's get going.
Just to the chat, pull yourself up with your high-backed armchair by the fire. Get yourself an adult beverage, or indeed, whatever I said last time, a few fat lines and some black tar heroin. Yeah, get yourself naked by the fire and just...
What? This has escalated very quickly.
And we're just going to get decadent today. That's the vibe today. It's just a decadent... You know what? We're not even in the high-backed armchair by the fire. We're lying on silk pillows by the fire. Okay. And we're all deeply aroused. Okay, carry on.
Oh, okay.
We're all smoking from a hookah.
Okay. So, I guess we've got rule... So, we covered rule 1 last time, which was just... Hang on, let's just nonsensical. Achieve verisimilitude.
Yes.
And he basically just didn't say anything of note. But this one is have no errors, which I think is very...
So, bearing in mind his advice last time for achieving verisimilitude was essentially, if you want to achieve verisimilitude, achieve verisimilitude.
Yeah, he didn't explain really how to do it.
Yeah. He just kind of was like, if you want to write good, write better. So, have no errors I'm intrigued by. Because I'm going to... I mean, I've read all this, but, like, I want to see what Matt's thoughts on this are. I want to see what the chat's thoughts on this are. So, why don't you take us through what you've picked out?
Okay, so obviously the first line of this chapter is AKA perfect writing. So... I think my main thought of this is just like, it's a bit like Draw the Rest of the Owl, you know, sort of. It's just sort of the best way to write a book is to write a perfect book.
Yeah, the best way to be good at writing is to write good.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we'll get to this in a minute, but he obviously hasn't really elaborated on how to make a perfect story yet, so we will get to that. But first, we've got writing is a volatile operation. There's an infinite number of ways to skin a cat, you might think, when dealing with the imagination and where it can take you.
Right, first of all, I just want to I know this is a common expression, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
No, there isn't. You're just skinning a cat. Like, the options you've got are start from the head or start from the arse, right? Or, like, start from the stomach. That's not exactly different ways to skin a cat. Just thought I'd point that out. Not really an issue with Smud, but there you go.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, well, having never skinned a cat, I quite like cats, so I can't really speak to that.
I've never skinned a cat either. I'm just saying. To my mind, there doesn't seem to be that many ways to do it.
Fair enough. Okay, right. So, but I think the best part is this: when dealing with the imagination, where it can take you, but there's a fairly small, carefully built road for clarity, understanding, and pacing to exist and flow properly in a story. So basically, what he's saying here is that there's one way to tell a story, and if you deviate from what he reckons is the best way to tell a story, then you're wrong. Yeah,
I mean that's standard Smud Boy thinking.
And yes, in shit literature, he is like he's the Mauler of YouTube as well. Really, he does have an EFAP ripoff podcast as well. So he's
like Diet Mauler. Yeah, he's like BTEC Mauler. You know,
BTEC Mauler. That's right. Yeah. So
that's probably a bit unfair on people who did BTECs, but we'll say Diet Mauler.
Diet Mauler. Or Mauler Zero. So he wants to.
yeah. Yeah.
So he goes.
He's Mauler without the skill.
Jesus, Mauler without the charm. So he's
Mauler with 20 additional years and much less charisma.
That's correct. Yeah. So and then he goes on to say, perfect writing comes from no errors, and not from having great creative ideas and well-actualized characters who hit dramatic highs. Perfect writing can be achieved with boring plots and unoriginal flat protagonists, but could you understood these plots and protagonists? So I think that just says it all, honestly. I mean he's just said that so long as your story is structured correctly and doesn't have any continuity errors, he reckons that it's perfect, even if it's boring and shit. Hello? Oh dear. Oh no. Oh dear. Oh dear. Mate? Are you there? Edgebrain. Okay, well, looks like my co-host had a bit of a technical issue here. So
hello, can you hear this?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, what happened there?
Discord decided that I didn't need to be heard anymore, I think is what happened there.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's fair.
It does that from time to time.
Fair. Okay. So where did you hear everything that I've just said?
No, we can go over it, but I will just say to shit literature, he has never published a book apart from this one, obviously, which is self-published. He claims to have written some short stories that were once lost to time. He said he saved them on a floppy disk and then deleted them.
Yeah, and we were originally very confused about this because obviously, floppy disks. But he is 40, so
he is 40.
We've now
so this could have happened in the early 90s.
Yeah.
I also want to shout out our good friend Neff, who said the Lovecraftian entity, who said that Smudboy had a ghostwriter when this he had a ghostwriter for this book, but it wasn't a ghost when they started, which I quite like. Under the Thunder. Yeah, I did no clip out of reality. That's what happens. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like Mr. and Mrs. Spitlick from Superman. Like I'm always bopping in and out of this dimension and the fifth dimension, because my brain is too hench to be contained by mere spatial dimensions.
You're too hench for this world. Okay. Because it is self-published, which is interesting because if he's willing to self-publish this, it does imply that he would also be willing to self-publish his own fictional works, but he's chosen not to do that. Well,
I think this paragraph though is quite telling because I think his stories are shit, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think they have great creative ideas or well-actualized characters who hit dramatic highs. Like, I think that's what he's saying, right? Is he's kind of being like, well, I feel like anyone who read his stories in these writing classes he allegedly took, we're probably like, oh, it's not very original, you know? Like, but so his response is like, well, at least it had no continuity errors, you fuck.
Yeah, so it does sort of seem a bit like bitterness in a way, so it does seem like he's sort of going, well,
Smudboy is entirely held together by bitterness. It's what motivates him, as far as I can tell.
That's fair. That's completely fair, honestly. But yeah, I do think it's very telling, considering everything he said, because when he criticizes, you know, again we're going to bring it up, the one movie that Smudboy talks about, Star Wars Episode 8.
Do not mention it by name. Do not mention it by name. Because I told Riot Fox to ban anyone who mentions it.
Oh, well.
So that includes you.
Oh, you can't ban me. It's my channel. All right, fine. In movies that he doesn't like, he does tend to criticize them based on weird nitpicks rather than actual like substantive criticisms based on you know, like boring plots and unoriginal.
Yeah, and it's the same with anything that he covers, right? Like his main the main substantive thing he ever says is like, oh, they disrespected the law, or they disrespected the fans, or whatever. Like, that's his issue with like Mass Effect, and Riot Fox says bonk.
Yes.
Yeah, that's his issue with Mass Effect, and that's his issue with the film that we won't be mentioning. Kezbox, the film we won't be mentioning was released in 2017 as part of a space opera franchise. And some people think it's very bad. That's all I can say about it. We're sworn to not speak of it.
It was the 8th installment of said very famous franchise.
Yes. And even though the 9th installment was much, much shitter, everyone still wants to talk about the 8th installment.
Yes.
So, I'm trying to think, is there any other franchise that could be? I don't think so.
Well, I've already just said it, to be fair. So.
Yeah, it's true. Anyway, look, yes. I think this paragraph is basically him being like, he's taking out some rage from writing classes.
Yes, basically. It is very telling, very strange. But
which is interesting because when I took writing classes at uni, and my teacher, my teacher pointed out that one of my scripts had a few derivative moments and a few kind of characters or lines of dialogue that were a bit cliched. The thing is, I took that advice, and, you know, at first I was a bit like, oh, I didn't think that was the case, but okay, fair enough. I took that advice, and what I did was I changed the stuff that she mentioned. I was like, oh, I took the advice on board because I could see her point. Just saying.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because it's like constructive criticism is a thing, guys. It's like, it's not, something doesn't have to be just shit or good. That's not how art or writing works. Sometimes there's something that's good apart from a few things, or shit apart from a few things.
Well, this is the thing.
Just take the advice on board.
Smudboy does claim to provide constructive criticism when he criticizes other people's work.
Yeah, but his constructive criticism of that fucking Captain America video we were watching was, this guy's an idiot, I want to punch him in the face.
Yeah.
That was the constructive criticism that he provided. So, do you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? And like, most Smudcasts are just him going, what a strange thing to say, or just going, no. or if it's Maggie Mayfish, he goes, she's crazy. You know, that's his constructive criticism. So like, what is that? You know?
Yeah. So anyway, moving on. He goes on a weird thing about Aristotle.
God, he loves Aristotle.
He does. It's but it doesn't really make sense. I did highlight it mostly because it does lean into quite a good metaphor. But he says, as brilliant as Aristotle was, understanding him takes longer than reading one of his sentences. Now, that could mean a number of things. I think basically he's having a dig at Aristotle for having long sentences or something.
So he's saying he's got long sentences and you really have to... you really have to dig into it to understand it, I guess. But I don't really know what he means by that. Again, I'm not super acquainted with Aristotle. So,
yeah, I think it's weird because we've noticed that one thing he's been doing repeatedly is advocating for talking down to the audience. Or like simplifying it to an absurd degree, which does seem to come through in this case because it does sort of seem a bit like he's saying Aristotle would be better if it was short, or if he was easier to read or had shorter sentences.
I'm going to agree with Neff, though. I'm pretty sure Smudboy hasn't read Aristotle either.
That's probably true.
Yeah, I think the thing... to be fair, I think Smudboy probably has a passing familiarity with Aristotle from, like, writing class, because he's mentioned, like, Aristotle's... is it called Dramatics? I can't remember. Like, the thing that he wrote about, how to write good plays or whatever. Like, he's referenced that a few times. But, like, that's a fairly standard thing to learn in writing classes, so I suspect he mostly knows Aristotle from that. Like, I doubt he's sat down and read much Aristotle.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure. Yeah. So he then does sort of clarify. He says a long trip needs a smooth road and an appropriate cruising speed to get from A to B quickly and properly.
Okay.
Why would you need to make your audience be forced to stop and ask for directions, hate the bumpy slow road as rocks and gravel?
Again, it's the metaphors. Again, it's the extended metaphors. What do they mean?
Yeah, so if basically...
Yes, sorry, celestial sitcom. Yes, poetics is what I was thinking of, not dramatics.
Basically what he's saying is Aristotle will be much better if he just wrote in very simple, short sentences and never used a word longer than, like a few syllables long. Right? And it goes on with this metaphor about the road. But then which is weird because if you try and apply this to Aristotle, he's describing Aristotle as a car.
Well, he's
and also the road.
I guess he's describing the meaning of his sentences as like a trip to a destination.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So we've got a interesting mixed metaphor here, which is
Sorry, I do just want to quickly shout out Shit Literature, who makes an interesting point. They say, I would be interested to hear what Smud has to say about Nabokov and Lolita. I bet he's one of those who doesn't understand it at all. I suspect he's not read it, and the reason that I say this is in his debate with Jack Saint, there is a section that actually called to mind Lolita for me, where he was saying about, you want your protagonist to be heroic, basically, to be morally good. And was saying, like, you couldn't have a kind of literature where the protagonist was just an awful, immoral, antisocial person. And I immediately thought, Lolita, right? Like, that's a famous example of a story that isn't, if you're not familiar, which I'm sure you are, is entirely narrated from the point of view of a paedophile.
Yeah, so the main character in Lolita is a monster. Like, that is...
Yeah, and like that's the entire point of the book, is like, how much do you fall for his rhetoric and how much are you yourself kind of seduced by him, right? Like, that's the point of the book. Or even like American Psycho or something like that, where like the entire point is going into this kind of disturbed mentality, right? And it's like, does he not know that these things exist? I mean, I think the answer is no.
Yeah, the answer is no, for sure.
Because Smudboy, and like, to be clear, I'm not having a go at people for not being well-read or not being, super into more kind of, I don't want to say more intellectual, but you know what I'm trying to say, like more kind of complex things. Like, if all you like is good guys, good bad guys, pew pew pew, totally fine. But maybe just don't pretend that you're the fucking font of all knowledge when it comes to narrative. You know what I mean? Like, you probably don't know everything there is to know if all you watch is pew 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 pew. Anyway.
Yeah, I will defer to Neff here. It says something about Aristotle's use of the Greek language. Neff is much more of an expert on languages than both of us.
Neff was around when Aristotle was writing these things. So.
Of course, being an ageless, Lovecraftian being.
Yeah, I think Neff was being dictated to by Aristotle, so I think he is an authority on that.
That's fair. Anyway, moving on from Aristotle. He has another good metaphor here, which is sort of a mix. A good writer treats their audience's intelligence and time like gold. They feed their readers with intelligent, clear ideas. They also prove to them that they can zip around a curve at high speeds and keep everyone excited, yet stay on the road. But first they must slow down and allow their passengers to enjoy a detailed view. So within this, we've got audience intelligence and time is like gold, and we must feed readers with ideas, and also ideas are a car.
Yeah, ideas are a car, but they're also the road, but they're also the destination.
Yes.
So bear that in mind.
Which is just.
I mean, what the fuck does that even mean?
It doesn't mean anything. It means he doesn't know how to use.
Thing.
It just means he doesn't know how to use metaphors or anything like that.
This man is a fool.
Yeah, and then we get more sort of Mauler-esque rhetoric where he says, while an active imagination can state why they like something till they're blue in the face, which is usually a combination of rose-tinted glasses and projection, any fool can tell you when something doesn't work, or, if lacking vocabulary, simply doesn't feel right.
Mate, you lack the vocabulary. Smudboy lacks the vocabulary to explain why these things are bad. Like, he's used about 1 billion words to justify not liking a fucking space film.
Yes, basically. We'll get on a bit more into the objectivity versus subjectivity thing later on, but I think it's interesting.
My neighbours are probably very confused about what I'm yelling about.
Fair enough. I don't have any neighbours. So.
If we get interrupted by the police, that's why.
Fair enough. Well, I live above a shop, so I can't imagine they'll really care. So.
No, yeah, true.
So then we skip a bit to an interesting bit I thought was worth saying, where he says, the rules of a universe and the law you created, e.g. magic, science fiction, technology, characters, personalities, etc., must be consistent to the point of being immutable.
Yes, immutable.
Which is just sort of... It's just like pointless, like, wanking over law again, right?
Well, law is all that matters, right? Law is the key element of all stories.
Yeah,
to these people.
It's just honestly like which is interesting as well because like we've gone over it a bit, but later on we will go on to talk about world building and how Smudboy doesn't really like world building, which is weird because like how do you get?
He likes law, but he doesn't like world building.
Yeah, so how do you get law without world building?
Because everything that he likes is a pre-established franchise, right?
Yeah.
So what he's saying is he doesn't want you to he doesn't want writers to make up new shit. He just wants them to play by the pre-established rules.
Yeah.
Right? Which again is one of his big issues with the space film that we won't mention. And the Last of Us 2 kind of as well, because like his big issue with that is that they killed Joel off early doors. And it's like, okay, but like so what? Like
the Last of Us 2 was just... I still haven't got over the fact that he made, like, what was it, 30, 50 videos about a fucking video game that apparently he hasn't even played. Ridiculous,
yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Shit literature, though. Yeah, it is impossible to objectively criticize art. Yeah, it's completely impossible. I mean, this whole book is motivated by Smud trying to be like, these are the building blocks of an objectively good story, right?
Yeah.
And he's not proved in any way that he can make an objectively good story. Yeah, Casbox as well. If you're bothered by the punctuation now, you're just going to have to learn to tune it out.
And also, there will be a treat later on with regards to the punctuation. So this, let's call it a setup and payoff, shall we?
Yes.
This is a setup of a later...
This is, well, as Smudboy would say, this is the Chekhov's gun.
This is the Chekhov's gun. So,
Sheep has just taken out his Glock. He's clearly laid it on the desk. And he's gone, right, remember that. It's coming back later.
Yeah, something like that, but it all depends on the size of the gap, as a wise man once said. So
fuck the police.
Yeah, we've skipped.
Can I just shout out Neff as well, saying if Smudboy's this focused on immutable law, I hope he never discovers Doctor Who.
I'm surprised he hasn't, because like don't that?
I'm sure he's aware of Doctor Who.
Because don't like the Mauler crowd really hate the Jodie Whittaker Doctor Who because it messed with some of the lore or something?
I don't know if that's the Mauler crowd, because I don't know how focused on who they are. Yeah, I mean, the issue with Doctor... I'm a big Doctor Who fan, for the benefit of the chat. Yeah, I like the thing with Doctor Who is the best you can hope for is that within a certain writer's era, the lore stays consistent. But yeah, it is just a kind of made up lore that makes no sense, really. You know.
Well, you'd expect that because it's been going for like 60 years or something.
Yeah, getting there. Be 60 years in 2023, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, like if you've got a series that it was only off the air for like 10 years or something, right? So it was. Yeah. So in theory, it was like going continuously for pretty much 50 years.
In the 60s and 70s, when the show was kind of in its heyday, people just didn't care about making lore make sense. Like, they just didn't.
Oh, yeah, no. Famously, Douglas Adams wrote for quite a lot of the 80s Doctor Who, didn't he? And he just did not give a shit about previous.
And a lot of the people who wrote for it back in those days just cared nothing for continuity, because there wasn't really the same kind of like nerd what's the word I'm looking for, like nerd community back then. So like the idea of people actually paying attention to that was fairly foreign to them at the time. Which is kind of like Star Trek, the original series, kind of has some of this as well, where it took a while for them to kind of go, oh yeah, actually we should make this make a bit more sense, you know?
Yeah, well, there's a whole thing with like the Klingons, isn't there, in Star Trek, whereas like they used to look like just normal people, and then they had like some kind of thing that made their foreheads different or something.
Yeah.
In Star Trek lore, so like this isn't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't care about lore. Honestly, I don't think it's very important.
I do and I don't. It's kind of it's nice if the lore is consistent, but also it doesn't really bother me beyond going, oh, that's a bit of a plot hole. Unless it's something that's like completely tears apart the universe of the thing you're watching. But even then, it's like, you know, yeah. Oh god, there's Doctor Who discourse in the chat. Kesbox, if you've not watched Capaldi, you've not watched Doctor Who, as far as I'm concerned. But also, shit literature. Christopher Eccleston is the boy.
Christopher Eccleston, he is my favourite Doctor, for sure, I would say.
Do you know, I rewatched him when I was on furlough, and his series is like probably top tier Doctor Who, in all honesty.
Yeah, I think
it's pretty fucking good.
The first Dalek episode with Christopher Eccleston, I think it's one of the best episodes ever of Doctor Who.
That one is fucking sick. And also, the one with the gas mask kids is pretty good.
God, that was terrifying, yeah. Anyway, moving on.
No, let's talk about Doctor Who. Fuck Smud Boy. Fuck him. No, let's talk about Doctor Who.
No, we're talking about Smud Boy. I'm taking control now. I'm the dom. So we've got.
I like Jodie Whittaker.
We can have a stream about Doctor Who if you want, but like we've got a whole book that we're trying to get.
Okay, well, you keep talking. I'm going to reach for my next adult beverage.
What's your next adult beverage?
Well, it is from the Badger Brewery in Dorset. It is the Hopping Hare Pale Ale.
Nice.
I like the Badger ones. They're quite nice. They tend to be a bit of a lighter bev.
Fair. So I don't know anything about beer at all. So I mostly highlighted this because he's got food analogy number 2, the Steakhouse.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
So, which opens with, now think of ordering a steak at a steakhouse. There are dozens of considerations.
That's all this fucking twat thinks about is ordering a steak at a steakhouse.
How it's cooked, quality and cut of meat, the amount, etc. A sense of taste is how one appreciates the qualities of something by a variable degree. Which are emotional, interpretive, reactionary, and largely subjective.
Okay.
So now we're going to discuss subjectivity through the medium of steak.
I mean, that is all that's right for people who haven't listened, like Kesbox, who haven't listened to. Also, Kesbox, yeah, I like. Kesbox, yeah, I like Jodie Whittaker's performance. I don't love the writing of her. Irrelevant. Let's carry on. So for the benefit of people who haven't listened to previous episodes, Smudboy loves his food metaphors. It started off with eggs, and now it's moved on to steakhouses. As Riot Fox here says, not the steakhouse for the love of humanity.
Yeah, he's strangely obsessed with in the glossary it was entirely eggs, or almost entirely eggs, and one mention of soup. And in this case, he's just, oh yeah, I should have just pointed out, we have used the trans flag color highlighters. That wasn't deliberate, but I do quite like that. It's pretty based.
I like that. We're supportive of the trans community, obviously, because we're not monsters.
Yeah, but he's very obsessed with his food metaphors, especially steak. He's a big steak guy.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, as I pointed out to Sheep in a private chat we had, I don't think I've said this on air, the idea of using steak as like this immutable objective thing, or like there is this, like he kind of talks about this platonic ideal of a steak, right? The issue with that is steak is famously a food which, and again, I'm a stupid vegetarian, I don't know about meat, but to the best of my knowledge, steak is prepared in such a way as the customer wants it to be prepared, right?
Yeah, so like when you're in a restaurant and you order a steak, they say, how do you want it cooked?
How do you want it done? How do you want it cooked? Because there is no objectively best steak. It's done to the preference of the consumer.
Yeah, and even then, you can, there's like different ways of do that.
Yeah.
So we've got, so I'm just going to quickly go over it. So, whereas components of a thing are largely mechanical and thus objective, e.g. medium rare, succulent, juicy, peppery, etc., which is just not true. We'll come back to that once I finish. Thus, a perfect steak, one with no errors, can be objectively observed to have perfect composition. You simply have to know...
Except it fucking can't, because steak is how you want it to be prepared.
Well, no, because you see, you simply have to know all the properties of steak there is and cover all your bases in producing it properly.
What a dickhead.
It's just yeah, so it's very strange that he did choose steak, because as you said, steak is notorious for being completely subjective in the way it's prepared. So like it's you can't have an objectively good steak, right? You've got things like the seasoning and all sorts, and like the way it's cooked and all things like he says, oh, is it medium rare? For a start, you don't have to have a medium rare if you prefer it. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the different kinds. Rare or
there's
well
rare,
done.
there's medium rare, there's well done. And sometimes you have like blue steak, which I think is like pretty much you show it the pan and then serve it. You know, like it's pretty minimal.
Yeah. So like in the chat, we've already got people arguing about how to make the perfect steak, which is a good indication that there isn't a way to make an objectively perfect steak.
Yes.
And again, even with things like seasoning, you've got people like different seasoning on their steaks. Like obviously, going by this, Smud Boy likes his with lots of pepper. He likes it to be peppery, and there are people who like it with sauce and all sorts.
To be fair to the I was going to call him the Canadian bacon. I don't know why. To be fair to the Canadian bacon, I do. When I ate meat, I did like a nice peppercorn sauce on the steak, so I get where he's coming from with the pepper. But yeah, just it is the worst food to pick, right? Because there's just so many ways to prepare it.
In fact, the only one that could possibly be worse is an egg, right? Because that's the only one that you've got more versions of it.
Casbox says club plus cow equals perfect steak. Again, shit literature. Putting sauce on a steak is also objectively wrong. Okay, I mean, the chat has descended into kind of madness just over the steak discussion. Go on, Sheep. Read on.
Okay, yeah. So we've got the steak.
Matt, you can't let me ramble like that without saying anything.
I'm sorry, but he does then go on to say, if anything is off about that steak, e.g., undercooked, overcooked, sinewy, etc., your steak is flawed. Which again, like,
sorry, that sounded like you were about to go into like the Wombles theme tune. Undercooked, overcooked, womble in free. Sorry, go on.
No, but I just said that, like, he's like saying, oh, what if it's undercooked or overcooked? It's like, well, maybe people like it well done, which he would probably think was overdone, or if it was underdone, people like Casbox was saying, they like it blue, So it's entirely subjective. That's the entire point.
I like it without murder, guys.
Wow. So he then goes on. He does bring the Steakhouse back. So he just says, if your writing is flawed, you risk breaking the willing suspension of disbelief, or breaking rule 1, angering the audience, from something doesn't feel right to, is this even a steakhouse?
Imagine, right, because this goes back to the glossary, right, where he was like verisimilitude, he compared to the feeling that you get when you walk into a steakhouse that you know it's a steakhouse, right?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? Does he regularly walk into steakhouses and go, or restaurants and just go, is this even a steakhouse?
I like to think he walks in and goes, no, this is a funeral parlor. Maybe he just doesn't know the way around his town.
In my opinion, a steakhouse and a funeral parlor are the same thing.
Have we considered that? Oh, Jesus Christ! Have we considered that he might just need glasses and he's not entirely sure what a steakhouse looks like?
Yeah, I think, to be fair, I think Smudboy just goes about his life in a state of confusion. Like, I think he's just like, where am I? Where am I? That's not a good Smudboy impression.
It's not a good Smudboy impression at all. No.
The thing, his voice is a little bit too, it's an octave too deep for me, I'll be honest. I can't quite get it, you know? His manly alpha Chad voice.
Manly alpha Chad.
To be fair to Smud, if he wasn't such a fucking boring twat, he'd have quite a pleasant speaking voice. It's just the fact that...
He's a boring twat.
Yeah, the things that come out of his mouth are just so boring to listen to. But he's got a good voice for radio, I'll give him that.
Okay, fair enough. So he then just gives another metaphor, which just says, when a story is flawed, even by a slight grammar error, which is like a bump on the road, the entire vehicle feels it.
This whole book is just bumps on the road.
Yeah, like, I just want to say, how many grammatical errors have we come across so far? Like, just in this chapter, we've come across, like, what was it, 2? That people in the chat were getting mad over. And he said that even a slight grammar error makes a work flawed, or something like that, which makes the entire work feel the weight of that, which is just wild to me, because, like, I don't understand how he can miss this many grammatical errors and then also say that if your book is off by a grammatical error, you've done it wrong. Basically, it's just wild.
Sorry, Kazbox is calling me out in the chat saying, fuck you, diet shamer. I'm only messing, I don't really care.
And he concludes the chapter by simply saying, perfect writing doesn't come from its positives, it comes from having no negatives.
That's just idiotic. Like, I can't even...
So a bad story can be written perfectly, but that doesn't make it a good story, right? And like a good story can have errors in it, but that could. But
I've read the sentence because I've read the book a few times. Basically, like, I've read the sentence quite a few times, and it stuck with me as just this kind of, I don't know what this mantra means. You know, perfect writing doesn't come from its positives; it comes from having no negatives. Because I'll be honest, if I'm watching a movie or I'm reading a book, I'm not sitting there going, "That had no shit bits," you know. Yeah. I normally go, oh, I liked it when this happened. I liked what they did with this. Like, it was kind of interesting how they did that. Like, I'm not sitting there going, oh, there was an absence of shit. Like, I don't know. Like, what does this mean? Also, a Celestial sitcom, we've discussed what Smudboy would think of James Joyce. We came to the conclusion he's not read it, probably hasn't heard of it.
Yeah, that's almost certainly true.
Yes, because I can't imagine Smudboy getting through Finnegan's Wake, you know? I mean, most people don't, but...
I think he does actually bring up Finnegan's Wake later in the book. Oh, shit. Oh, no.
I can't remember if he does. I mean, we'll find out. Yeah, people are really trying to process what that sentence means. I might get it tattooed on my back.
Jesus Christ. Okay, so... Okay, so now we've got bring meaning, which is rule 3. I found my place again now. So he does ask, why do people read? Which is something we already answered earlier in the book, but he does then...
Well, we didn't answer.
Well, that we didn't answer, but he thought that he answered earlier in the book. So
he discussed it earlier in the book.
We're mostly going to ignore it, except for one point, which is catharsis, bracket, big Aristotle word that comes from tragedy, a release of emotion.
Thanks for explaining what catharsis means, Smud. Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it?
I just love how he talks down to his audience. So it's like catharsis, it's just a big word, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's some interesting stuff where he says like, a form of escapism, a power fantasy. Power fantasy is a really interesting concept to me. I can't really articulate why because I've already started on the booze, but the idea of what is power fantasy within fiction, I suppose, is something that I'd actually like to explore and get interested in, because isn't it kind of weird to watch something and be like, I mean, I guess superheroes are kind of like a power fantasy, right? Because you're like, if I could leap tall buildings in a single bound and be a total badass,
I think they're the ultimate power fantasy, right? Like Superman is the perfect power fantasy. We will talk about Superman a bit later on, because Smud Boy is incapable of talking about anything without bringing up superheroes at some point.
Yeah. It's just an interesting concept.
So later on he does say, give the audience something intellectual to chew on, which was just a neat metaphor I thought was... giving them a nice, beefy, intellectual steak.
Now
this also...
Sorry, shit literature. Power fantasies, those Goosebumps books where you choose what to do.
True, yes. Choose your own adventures.
Shout out to R.L. Stein.
The absolute boy. So we've got... now, this part is the part that I thought was extremely telling about part of Smud Boy's ideology, which is give boys and men strong, logical, idealized, masculine heroes.
Yes. I'm glad you've highlighted this bit. Sorry,
go on. Give girls and women strong, intelligent, sensitive, feminine heroes, dittos with the villains and villainesses. What the fuck?
And then he then qualifies that with, if you opened a steakhouse, you better have various types of quality steak to sell.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up as a separate
He's already
thing,
contradicting himself by saying that there's an objectively good steak by going, well, you best have a steak for the women and a steak for the men.
What is a woman's steak? What does that even look like?
A woman's steak? I imagine that's something that Roger Moore would say in James Bond.
Oh, like the proper old school ones.
Yeah. He's like, how dare you serve me a woman's steak? But what if you're, gender fluid or agender or whatever? Is there a steak for you?
That's a good point. Yeah, well, my partner is non-binary, so I think that after lockdown, if we go out for a steak sometime, what are they going to be able to order in Smud's world?
Well, I suppose you could, I guess to Smud, maybe you could have half a man's steak and half a woman's steak. It's like surf and turf. I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't really make any sense. But I do kind of want to get into give boys and men strong, logical, idealized masculine heroes.
Oh, I hate it, yeah.
I hate that. Because the thing as well is, can men not relate to female characters?
That seems to be what he's saying, right? He does seem to be saying that we should sort of impose our sort of our current societal ideals of masculinity, including toxic masculinity, which is a phrase that this lot always refuse to understand, onto modern children, right? Which is just actually incredibly upsetting to me. What?
Yeah.
Surely, as a society, we should be challenging these sorts of things, or at least questioning if these things are worth talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. The idea of logical is interesting as well. It's interesting that he says logical for the masculine hero, which certainly.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? That, when you flip it around, he's basically. And why do they have to be idealized heroes? Why can't they just be people?
There's some good discourse about the gender of steaks in the chat.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Women's steak is seasoned with estrogen.
And men's steak is seasoned with testosterone. I used to know a guy at uni who thought that cum that came from a penis was testosterone.
What?
He thought that cum was testosterone and woman cum was estrogen.
Oh, that must be why I'm so manly.
Yeah, he also
been sucking so many dicks.
I mean, this guy had some interesting views about a lot of stuff. We don't need to get into that. Anywho, yes, back to Smud.
Yeah, so this is probably the sentence that I think is the most revealing, because I think he does sort of I don't want to like use the phrase, but he does sort of hide his power level to
Oh,
well, I do think that he is a lot more conservative than he actually like portrays himself, right? And I think that often doesn't come out. And I think this is an example of it.
So shout out to Neff. For me, the absolute ideal of non-toxic masculinity is Fred Rogers. Yeah, big shout out to that. Because then, because that's the thing with like Mr. Rogers, would you say that he was typically masculine? I mean, it depends what you mean by typically masculine.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, this is the thing. Yeah, logical, idealized masculine heroes. Like I assume he's kind of ripped action heroes, right? Like I don't know, or like Sherlock Holmes's James Bond's, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of implies that like, but then even within that, like if you look at like say Sherlock Holmes, who I would think of as kind of a logical, idealized, strong sort of masculine figure.
Yeah.
He's a deeply flawed figure, even in the Victorian novels, right? Because he's a drug addict.
Yeah.
And B, like in the first book, a study in Scarlet, I think I'm right in saying. Yeah, a study in Scarlet. He like Watson. There's a whole chapter where Watson lists his deficiencies in knowledge, basically, and like kind of goes on about like, oh, he's kind of an eccentric guy who like, you know, he basically in modern parlance, Sherlock Holmes would probably be considered bipolar, but because like when he's on a case he's very up and he's very kind of manic, and then when he's not on a case he just slumps all the time, right? Like he's just kind of a depressive like that.
I mean even in the modern interpretations of him, in this BBC show one, he doesn't know that the Earth revolves around the sun, right? Because it's just
which is from the book.
Oh, it's actually from the book. Yeah, so it's not important to him. So it's just like this whole book is about writing flawed characters, right? But he's suggesting that we give men an idealized masculine hero. So, like, which is it? You know. Like...
Oh, I do just want to address Kez. I wanted first of all, right, folks. Yeah, wholesome masculinity is good and important. Yes, it is. Kez box. Yeah, Holmes is quite a soft form of masculinity in that he and Watson are very close to their feelings. Yeah, I think this kind of says something about the way that like Smud sees the world versus the way I see the world, I suppose. Is like, to me, Holmes is a very typical masculine figure. He has a very close bond with his male friend, obviously, and that's been interpreted a number of ways. I would say that he is, because he's so focused on logic, rationality and all that, that is seen as a very, I wouldn't say that I only associate that with men, but like typically that's very associated with men, is what I would say as like why Holmes is a typically masculine figure. Again, this is the problem with all this writing advice, right? It's like it's so open to interpretation.
Yeah, so even like obviously we would disagree strongly that there should be like strong masculine heroes in general, but then even if we were to grant the premise, we can't really decide what a masculine hero would be. You know? Yeah,
it's just an odd it's an odd way of seeing the world that Smudboy has.
And basically he's saying that we should enforce our gender norms onto people through media, right? Which is weird because it's what like him and the EFAP people like sort of accuse the left of doing, right? Is that they'll constantly go on about how, putting gay people in movies is pushing an agenda or something like that. And like it's just like, well, what are you doing then, right? It's just that their agenda is sort of generally accepted as the status quo. I don't know, that just really got to me. It just made me very upset. I guess that people genuinely think this nowadays.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? We've now got Sherlock Holmes discourse in the chat from Kesbot. He's probably gay and in love with Watson, but it was hidden as they were best friends. I think it's interesting. I'm certainly not against Holmes and Watson being interpreted as having gay undertones. I will say it wasn't uncommon for unmarried people to live together at the time. So there is a certain amount of kind of through a modern lens, we might go, oh, were they in love? But I don't know necessarily that that's what Arthur Conan Doyle had in mind. That said, death of the author. I do, personally, from my interpretation, I think that the way Holmes feels towards Watson is as close to being in love as he can achieve. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I see him as
think
fairly
it's perfectly,
sexless.
I think it's perfectly valid to.
Oh yeah. I'm not forcing my interpretation on anyone else. I'm just saying, like, as a fan of the character, I personally see like his love for Watson as being fairly asexual, but also like it's as close to an intimate relationship as he allows himself to have.
Well, I mean, obviously the real answer is that we don't know, so we can just speculate either way. So,
and like, to be clear, I think what Stephen Moffat did by going, they're gay, they're not gay, they're gay, they're not gay, that was bollocks.
Oh, with the queer baiting. Yeah.
Either have them kiss or don't, you know?
Yeah. It's really clear, not controversial anymore.
They should have kissed. They should have kissed.
Yeah.
They should have had a graphic sex scene.
Anyway, moving on. Smudboy is just.
Oh yeah, sorry, Casbox. Yeah, I totally know where you're coming from. Yeah, there is a streak of historians claiming same-sex couples were just best friends. Yeah, I know, and it is laughable. And like, I'm not trying to be clear. I'm not trying to dissuade any gay reading. That's not the right term, is it? But any LGBT plus kind of reading into anything really. I'm just giving my personal interpretation, and I do think there's homoerotic undercurrents, shall we say?
Yeah. So as obviously the chat is going over at the moment, there is a whole thing with historians sort of downplaying or ignoring gay subtext.
There's a lot of they were just close friends, or that kind of shit. Wherein it's like, pretty sure they were having the sex, but there you go.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously the main one. Hang on, I'm just going to bring it up here.
Because shockingly, LGBT people weren't invented in the 21st century. Like, they've been around since people were around.
So, I mean, the most obvious one is this famous Wikipedia thing, which is a painting of Sappho and her friends.
Right, yeah. Sappho, the famous lesbian, from whom we get the term sapphic.
Who lived on the Isle of Lesbos, from whom we get the word lesbian.
Yes.
In this sort of position, which is obviously what... what friends do. I mean, it's what I do with my friends, but I mean, I'm quite a unique case here, I think. It's just wild.
Yeah, actually, Kesbox, I totally agree with that. He was certainly asexual, but I don't think he was aromantic. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I would go so far as to say that. Yeah, when I say he was in love with Watson as much as he can be in love with someone, like, I think that's what I mean by that. He probably had a romantic attraction, but not necessarily a sexual one, because I don't see Holmes as a sexual character. I know that they always try and portray him in recent stuff as being a bit kinky and all that, but I just don't think that makes a lot of sense. But anyway, we're going to go round and round in circles. This is not the Sherlock stream.
No. Okay, so Smudboy goes on to say, give critics no ammunition to punch holes in your story, give them a perfect plot with no confusing sentences to read. So again, he is just advocating for just very boring, short, easy to read sentences and sentence structure, and just sort of talking down to the audience, making a very shit pulp novel, basically, is what he's suggesting here, right? Yeah, give critics no ammunition to punch holes in your story. God, what a fucking idiot. Yeah, so I was going to go on about this, but it's not really very interesting. Basically, he suggests that writing...
sorry, fuck him. He's written so many confusing sentences in this book. Like, all this fucking Steakhouse talk is confusing. Sorry, go on.
So as basically he goes on about how writing is your idealized reality from your philosophical, anecdotal, mental permutations. You're the one with the ability to put meaning behind your ideals. What great lesson or wisdom will you share? Which I think is interesting, because he gets really pissed off when people put politics that he disagrees with in movies. I just thought that was worth mentioning.
But remember, he also thinks, when it comes to politics and pop culture, that Watchmen is an apolitical text, and the West Wing is an apolitical text. So
I think also he said House of Cards is apolitical as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, what a fool.
Yeah, so it's got right conflict. I don't think this is very interesting, but it's basically his introductory sentence is, like a dog needs walking, a story needs conflict. If there's no conflict, there's no point. There's nothing worth doing. So I'm just going to skip that, because to be honest with you, like, we know what conflict is. It's just, like, basically all he's advocating for here is just, like, making sure that your characters suffer, which, like, okay. Like, not very interesting or groundbreaking. It's fine.
I mean, I'll be honest, it's hard to think of a story that doesn't have some measure of conflict.
Yeah, I mean, I don't 100% disagree with him on that. It's just there's just not much to say.
There's a good point in the chat from Julia Maria, who says it's kind of sad how focused he is on making the story uncriticizable instead of making it enjoyable or meaningful. And I think Julia has cut Smudboy to the quick there. Like, I think that is totally how his brain works. It's more about being uncriticizable than it is about creating anything good.
Yeah, no, for sure, I agree. Yeah.
Like, it's more like his definition of what a good story is something that he can't pick holes in, you know?
Yeah, which is a very
boring way of viewing things.
It's a very sort of critic's way of creating a story, right? Is that like you approach it as a critic as opposed to as someone who likes stories.
To be honest, I think that's unfair to most critics, because I think most critics understand, you know, the subjectivity of art criticism, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I referenced Pauline Kael on one of the other streams, but she famously was like, no, criticism should be subjective, and you should be as opinionated as possible.
Yeah.
Writing on film is like...
Oh.
Hello?
Hi, yeah, sorry, your mic went a bit weird, that's all.
Yeah, sorry, my laptop's a piece of shit. I think it's...
It's okay, mine's held together by sellotape at the moment. So.
Mine is also.
Brilliant.
I think it's when I knock the charger a little bit, it kind of cuts out. But anyway, I'll try to sit still. What I was saying about Kael though was like her writing on film is still really compelling to read, even if you've not seen the film, or you're like, what the fuck is this movie that she's even on about from like the mid 70s or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's entertaining to read because she's so opinionated and she's so good at putting her opinion across and just kind of going, you know, and kind of taking apart the components of the film and saying like, this is why it worked for me and why it didn't, you know. Yeah. I mean, he's just I don't know.
Yeah, so
we know what he is. He's a fool.
Yeah, so we've got rule 5 next, which is the big two, which is the protagonist and antagonist.
Yes.
So I think it's interesting that he sort of opens it by saying, a story is and should have a singular representation of ideas or ideologies. Which is just... no. That's just... That makes for a really... Like, it can. You know, obviously that's fine. But, you know, something like... I don't know, something like Game of Thrones, let's say, where everyone has their own sort of ideology or ideas, and they all sort of oppose one another, right? That's sort of the whole point.
Yeah, well, he's talking about protagonist versus antagonist. So I think what he's saying is like the protagonist should represent the ideology of the work, right?
Well, that's not even necessarily true, though. I mean, I know obviously like he doesn't like it, but a movie like I don't know, let's say Black Panther, right? Like the villain
that is the exact film that I was thinking of.
Yeah, the villain in that story has a point. Like, and we've mentioned it before, but basically Marvel occasionally do a thing where they make the villain have a point, but then also make them do terrible things so the audience doesn't 100% agree with them.
But though that's kind of the thing, though, isn't it? Where it's like this, like Black Panther's a good example of, and I'm pretty sure this is Aristotle, thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis. Because you have T'Challa and the traditional side on one side, then you have Killmonger and his supposed bloody revolution on the other side, and then the end of the movie is a reconciliation between those two ideas, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think pretty sure that is Aristotle. It's one of the Greek lads, anyway. The idea of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. You know, like anyway, like what? Yes, whatever. Why am I bothering? Why am I bothering at this point?
Okay, so then he does have quite a good point where he basically just says don't like have people with multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder because it's a bit shit, right? But then he says this is a writing technique which is nothing more than lying to the audience, which calls into question the validity of the narrator and whatever perspective they're using, i.e. is third person, omniscient, truly omniscient, an evil genius, an unreliable narrator. It should be avoided till one is more experienced in the craft, and even then would still be seen as an inferior technique in comparison to showing and implying character reveals through normal, believable twists. So basically he's saying that unreliable narrators are always objectively wrong and you should never use them.
Yeah.
Which is just, why would you say that, right?
Yeah, sorry, to be clear to Mr. Man 991, we're not saying. I don't know if they're arguing with us or Smudboy. But yeah, we're not saying that bad guys should just be bad for the sake of being bad, right? I think your criticism of Marvel is that they often have a. Oh, see you later, Kesbox. They often have a villain who has a point and like would otherwise be completely right. Like, I think a better example than Killmonger is your man from Spider-Man, the first one.
Oh yeah,
Vulture.
Michael
Yeah.
Keaton,
yeah, I think because like Vulture is basically ideologically 100% correct, but they have to have him like murder innocent people just to make him the villain. Which like we're not saying that it's bad to have a villain who's kind of right. I don't think we're even saying it's bad to have a villain who's right apart from their methods. I think it's just from Marvel, it can sometimes come across as a bit like in any other text, Tony Stark would be the villain, right?
Yeah.
But we're supposed to think of him as the hero for reasons that are kind of unclear.
Well, that's one of the points of both Spider-Man movies so far, right? With Far From Home as well. They had the Mysterio. He was sort of, like, him and his crew were people who'd been fucked over by Tony Stark, and it's like like Tony Stark is kind of the bad guy, right? Okay,
Mr. Man. Yeah, I meant that as a criticism of Smudboy. Yeah, fair enough. So sometimes I do want to just clarify things. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like I don't necessarily want this to just be us like ragging on Smudboy. Like, if we can have interesting conversations about story structure and character creation and stuff like that, like that's all the better for it, you know. And yeah, Neff actually says, Ozymandias from Watchmen is a good example of this, where he's a villain who's motivated by wanting to end the nuclear standoff between America and Russia, right? But like his method of doing so is awful. Yeah.
Yeah. So so you can have, so basically he's wrong about that with the ideological. I mean, he's basically sort of thinking in terms of, I don't know, like a Star Wars where the bad guys are evil fascists and the good guys are rebelling against them. But again, like there are movies even mainstream movies, that are a lot more complicated than that I guess he's just not really considering.
Yeah, like the Marvel movies that we just mentioned, it's not like they're obscure texts, is it?
No, well, yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah. And like, to be fair, I want to get away from just talking about Star Wars and Marvel and all this kind of stuff, but yeah, it's interesting. Pike L. Yeah. Sorry, Under the Thunder's talking about that Sappho picture. With she's obviously getting eaten out. Pike L. Do you think that if Smudboy and others who criticize like him refer to their style as formalist critique rather than repackaging it as objective, would there be as much blowback? I think no. I think if they kind of said, I mean, first of all, I don't quite think what they're doing is formalist critique. But if they kind of, I mean, this has kind of been a point that's been raised a couple of times, is like if Mauler, Smudboy et al. Kind of were like, they changed the wording of the word objective and kind of went, they're talking about, normative standards or as Pike L says, formalist critique, then there'd probably be less blowback because they'd be clearly putting a lens on it.
I don't know. Well, the thing I noticed from like I did watch a bit of Smudboy's latest stream to make that video, after you like pointed out to me some of the like weird stuff he said, and I think at some point in that they do actually say they do have quite a lot of derision for people who do study film and who have like an academic background in it. So it does sort of seem like they're deliberately distancing themselves from that kind of academic frameworks or language in order to sort of bash people who aren't, Yeah, I know Mauler definitely has a chip on his shoulder about this, because I think I think I'm right in saying, forgive me if I'm mistaken here, chat, I think I'm right in saying that he is not a university educated man, and he takes a certain amount of pride in that. So I think he sees, the people that he criticizes, like Jack Saint and people like that, he sees them as like overeducated, it's that kind of typical thing of like, oh, they're just lefty film critics who don't really know what they're talking about, They just want to have these silly subjective lenses. So I think to answer Pike L's question, I don't think they would ever repackage their style because they would see that as backing down. But I think basically, if I wouldn't have as much of a problem with the quote-unquote objective criticism if they packaged it as this is a lens that we're seeing it through, whether that's formalism
or whatever. If they kind of said like, "Oh, we're criticizing it from this angle," that would be fine. But it's the fact they're like, "No, it's objectively good or objectively bad, and if you like this, you're wrong." That's the issue that I have with it.
Fair enough. So
Sorry, that was an impactful pause at the end there.
that's fair.
It was like, yeah.
So,
But
sorry.
yeah, sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, he goes on to say, regardless of their outcomes, a story is about bracket theme bracket them. Their greatest hurdle or challenge is the other. All proper stories have this as their own minor or major theme. Man versus man.
He means human versus human.
All proper stories are about this struggle. Man versus man is inherently ideology versus ideology, which is the point of personification.
I don't know really know what he's gibbering on about now. I mean, I guess on some level, most stories are about an ideology versus another ideology. The thing is, whenever we bring this up, whenever he brings up these, like, this is what stories are about, all that I can think of are stories that don't conform to that.
Yeah. No, for
you know
sure,
what I
yeah.
mean? Like, for some reason, something that just popped into my little noodle just then was My Neighbor Totoro, where I'm like, there's no fucking ideology versus ideology in that. It's like, there is a conflict in the more existential sense, but, like, you know what I mean? There's no villain in that. There's no antagonist, apart from, like, death, I suppose.
Oh, so that's the sitcom. With regards to man versus self, he did sort of semi-mention it, but basically say, don't do it, essentially. It says, whilst it is possible to have only one character personify both conflicting ideologies, it is highly unbelievable. So he just...
In his mind, you have one set ideology and you never differentiate from that. I guess that's Smud Boy's mentality there, right? Like,
yeah,
he's kind of like, I will never budge on my principles, if you want to call them that.
Yeah.
Because if I do, that's wrong. He's a silly boy.
So we move on to Rule 6, clarity, which is basically going to be entirely just advocating for talking down to the audience. But I think probably the most exciting part of this is he starts open with sort of use that old acronym KISS, or keep it simple stupid, but instead of stupid he's just gone expletive because he doesn't want to use the word stupid.
Does he think it's like keep it simple shithead?
Keep it simple shit ass.
Shit ass. Keep it simple, son of a bitch. That's more than one word. I don't know why he's put expletive there.
It's very I do genuinely think that he has a weird thing about language.
Well, he's not actually put expletive. Is that expletive?
Well, he's put explicative, which is the wrong word, but he means expletive. So then he goes, write things as simple as possible and with less adjectives than the previous sentence, but only for the point of clarity. This may involve removing words or using synonyms to replace sentences. So again, he's just saying, don't use like the expanse of the English language. Don't bother, trying to sort of use it, sort of play with language or do anything even mildly complex. Write things as simple as possible. The funny thing is that rather than as simply as possible, he's just simplified that. Write things simple, basically.
Yeah, I mean the thing with that is like as general writing advice, keep it concise is pretty solid, right?
Yeah.
To try and claim that that's objective is just wrong. Because like look at something like I don't want to hold up H.P. Lovecraft as a great guy, but as a writer, like part of his style is that he deliberately uses kind of purple prose, right? Like he kind of deliberately overcooks every sentence to kind of give a sense of what he's talking about, right? Like he uses these kind of like archaic words and stuff to give a sense of this kind of like ancientness that he's evoking.
Yes,
and again,
we've
referenced James Joyce as well, where like the point of Joyce is to be confused on some level.
Yeah, there can be very good reasons for like complicating things or using language that a lot of people might not completely get, right? But
because fuck learning new words, right? Fuck that off.
What kind of fucking loser learns words?
fuck, that's sky high.
Yeah.
But it's like Neff points out that fewer adjectives. Celestial Sitcom points out that, to be fair, Jordan Peterson could stand to take that advice. Completely agree. Jordan Peterson is the kind of man who will always say something like "be cognizant of" when much simpler phrases would do. But yeah, so yeah, there's a general kind of as a general bit of writing advice. Yeah, keeping it simple is the best way to go, or finding the most concise way of saying something is the best way to go. But again, like we've said, there are multiple reasons why you might not.
Yeah. So again, like all of these rules are not necessarily applicable. So he does say, if you still can't get the idea across after a paragraph, start again. Try next time with smaller sentences, less words, and thus less ideas.
Okay.
just sort of talk to your audience like they are idiots, and there's this sort of idea sort of permeates through this entire book, and it really does sort of really get to me. So this is where what you're trying to say takes a backseat to what your audience, the one with the lowest reading level, can understand.
We're back to this again.
Like, why is it with the
you've got to
level?
write for your lowest reading level reader can understand it.
It's like, no, it's like write
also, you don't know. Once you've written a book, you don't know who's going to pick it up, right? So you don't know who your lowest reading level reader is.
Yeah. Like,
so what does that even mean?
Well, I mean, I'm like, you know, I when I was a kid, I was reading sort of books for adults and things like that. But it's the sort of lowest reading level. I mean, you have a target audience, right? And Smudboy thinks that he's a genius, and previously he's essentially stated that that in order to understand his book, you really have to understand Plato, and other utterly ridiculous things. So it does sort of imply that he expects only intelligent people to read his books, but then also he advocates for talking down to them as if they're idiots.
I just want to shout out Pike L, saying it might be assuming on their part, but Smudboy mostly analysed video games, which have a pretty basic being once thing block structure as it goes. Yeah, this is kind of what's interesting about Smud, is he definitely did start off reviewing video games. His kind of origin story lies in the Mass Effect fan community, where he is not particularly popular, it seems. But yeah, he kind of applies the logic that he applied to like reviewing Mass Effect to pretty much any kind of fiction, which is interesting, because as you kind of getting at there, Pike L, obviously video games have a very different plot structure to a movie or a book or something that, you know, you're not actively participating in. Because in terms of video games, like, yeah, keep the plot simple is kind of a pretty good shout, because there's other things to consider, like mechanics and playability and stuff like that.
Yeah, obviously you're not like playing a book or anything, are you? So like,
unless it's one of those Goosebumps books.
Unless it's one of those Goosebumps books.
Choose your own adventure. Shout out to R.L. Stone.
Okay. So he then sort of gives an example. It says, keep it simple. E.g., the engine runs on quantum particles. Bob was sad. So we're talking like that level of talking down to your audience. Bob was sad.
The engine runs on quantum particles. Bob was sad.
Bob was sad. It's just the Bob was sad bit. It's just really.
I like to imagine they're from the same paragraph of the same book.
Bob was sad because the engine runs on quantum particles.
Yeah. The engine runs on quantum particles.
Okay, so now we've got unwritten rules, which is funny because he's now written them down.
Yeah. No, but what you've got to understand, Matt, is that he's writing them down because he's been amongst the hooded scholars of story, and he's taken their secrets, and he's like Prometheus is handing them out to mankind, right? He's stolen the fire of narrative from the gods, and he's bestowing it upon us.
He's like, oh fucking hell, he's just an idiot. Right here, so
celestial sitcom. He's literally saying tell, don't show. Fascinating point, because he was banging on about showing and never telling in the previous chapter.
He was.
Yeah.
So we've got writing is a natural process akin to thinking. One must not have the devil's advocate's eyes looking over your shoulder, weighing each of your words, scaring you into contemplative pacing, and worse, frozen in fear, unable to write. Writing should be simple, straightforward, but certainly not easy. You're pulling your heart out of your chest and using your guts and blood to stimulate another's mind.
What?
It's just, what a way of writing it. Just...
Yeah, let's just go over that again, shall we? Writing is a natural process, akin to thinking. One must not have the devil's advocate's eyes looking over your shoulder, weighing each of your words, scaring you into contemplative pacing, worse, frozen in fear, unable to write. Writing should be simple, straightforward, but certainly not easy. You are pulling your heart out of your chest and using your guts and blood to stimulate another's mind. What do we think that means?
I don't know. Well, I think he's sort of saying don't like second guess yourself. So one must not have the devil's advocate's eyes looking over your shoulder, right?
But the devil's advocate, like as a phrase, that means someone who doesn't believe the argument they're making, right? They're just trying to find holes in your argument, right? Yeah. Like that's what people mean when they say like, oh, I'm playing devil's advocate. They're saying like, look, I'm not necessarily arguing from my own perspective. I'm saying like this is something that your opponent will bring up, right? And that's my experience with the phrase.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, so I don't know what he means by that actually in that case.
Yeah, Darth Gently. I bet he was very proud of that sentence. Yeah, you can tell that he probably clocked off for the day after that one, and went and jerked himself off in the mirror while going, "You're so brilliant."
Yeah, I think after that, he, rather than pulling his heart out of his chest and using his guts and blood to stimulate another's mind, he pulled his dick out of his pants and used his cum to stimulate his own penis.
Now, I don't want to say this because it might not be true, but I think that he probably pulled his cock out, wanked, came up into the air and caught the jism in his own mouth.
Jesus Christ!
Allegedly. Allegedly.
In Minecraft.
In Minecraft. Oh dear.
Okay, so he then goes on to say, "What I can give you here is a simple structure, but not in the sense of your style. That, along with your manners, sense of morals, and communication, is all yours."
The manners. He was talking about the manners last time,
and he said that I don't have any manners because I was mildly rude to him on the internet as well.
Well, you don't. You're a vagabond and a blackguard, as we know. But I don't really know what he means by the manners, because he was on about the manners, wasn't he? He was like, your manners will infect... I think he means like manners in the sense of like mannerisms, you know, your way of thinking. Yeah,
but he says the sense of morals, but like he doesn't like when people put their sense of morals into the work, though, right? Because they in the film that we shall not mention, there's very mild anti-capitalist or anti-war profiteering.
Imagine being anti-war. What a pussy.
Yeah, it's like there's mild anti-war profiteering messaging in there.
Imagine being anti-war profiteering. What a strong stance to take. Jesus fucking.
But he doesn't like that. But like obviously you've got like sense of. But like, he doesn't like morals if it's morals that he doesn't agree with, right? So it's very strange.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's okay to have politics or morals in your text so long as they're not leftist pinko nonsense, you know.
So now we've got some excellent Smudboy prose, which I really want to.
Please
go over with you. Go nuts.
Please.
Fortune and your muse may smile upon you in the middle of the night, only for the harsh reality to wake you, chastising you, which he misspelled, for your deluded, drunken madness of the night before. For this reason, you need a peanut gallery. And I think this is incredibly important because here he specifically says that he wants and advocates for people editing, sort of reviewing and going over and criticizing his work. But when people do it, he gets very upset.
Well, isn't this kind of... I mean, he was talking about like brevity and concision a minute ago. What he's saying here is basically the famous adage from Ernest Hemingway, the write drunk, edit sober. Now, Hemingway managed that in 4 words. Smudboy, and like to be fair to Smudboy, Hemingway is famous for being able to keep it brief, right? Like that's one of the things he's famous for, other than being a misogynist, is being able to keep his prose taut, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to, it's unfair to compare him to that. But Smudboy has written essentially a whole chapter on this premise, right? Whereas he could have just quoted Hemingway at the start and gone, be done with it, right? But yeah, I think this is really interesting. I want to just go over that phrase again. Fortune and your muse may smile upon you in the middle of the night, only for the harsh reality to wake you. He spelled chastising wrong. You for your deluded, drunken madness of the night before. For this reason, you need a peanut gallery. So yeah, you're right. He doesn't take criticism well, as we know. So that's a load of old shit. But I don't know why. In the same paragraph that he's saying like, keep it simple, expletive, he's then going on this fucking. I don't know why he's then got his feather quill, put on his frilly fucking sleeves, and decided to write, "Fortune and your muse may smile upon you in the middle of the night." Like, what is this?
Yeah,
that's not keeping it simple, is it?
No, it's yeah. So later on in the same chapter, it does say, reminds you how bad you are. So the best kind of editor is someone who's not like you, who doesn't think like you, and yet who strangely likes all the things you like, but for different reasons. And my theory is that that's literature devil in his case, but again, that's just pure speculation.
Well, maybe that's why he said the devil's advocate earlier, because it's a literature devil's advocate.
Oh, maybe. So, and reminds you how bad you are, and shows you on page 67 of chapter 5 of paragraph 3 how you're using the same trite idea you used in chapter 2. It'll crush you. You'll begin questioning your self-worth and skill as a writer. That's good. You need a different perspective, and that requires differing opinions. You need to be broken down. That big, beautiful ego brimming with bright ideas needs a hazing. That doesn't mean your editor will have the greatest suggestions for your writing, but you need to challenge your own perceptions of how to express yourself in the clearest possible way. Now, I think this is incredibly ironic, considering Smudboy's very, very reluctant reaction towards any kind of criticism of him at all.
Yeah, no, that's what's interesting about this, is that I broadly agree with him on this paragraph. Like, you do need to think about, if you're writing for an audience anyway, if you're not just writing for your own amusement, you need to think about like how other people are going to perceive it, right? Because you know the story and the characters and the meanings that are in your head, but a reader doesn't. They have to discover it, right? So I broadly agree with him here.
Yeah, but the thing is that he doesn't follow his advice.
Yeah. I don't mean to stop the stream dead, but I just want to point out, moving on to the next beer, again from the Badger Brewery of Dorset. Nice. This is the Thirsty Ferret, an amber ale, apparently the bronze winner of the World Beer Awards. So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Let's have a look what the Thirsty beer looks like.
The Thirsty Ferret. Yes.
Oh, Thirsty Ferret. Okay.
The Thirsty Ferret, yes.
Oh, okay. Lovely. Yeah, that looks nice. Just put up a picture on stream. Okay.
It is quite nice, yeah.
So basically
this is a beer cast. I like that this is also a beer cast now. I'm reviewing beers.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
They've all been good.
I don't know anything about beer, so
there's not much to know, mate. You either like it or you don't.
Okay. Fair.
Although obviously there is the objectively good beer.
What is the objectively good beer?
You don't know what that is.
Okay.
Oh, let me think. What is the objectively good beer? I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. So I just wanted I did highlight one phrase that he used in regards to like letting other people read your work, which is, and then you must get slaughtered.
Yes.
Just an incredibly pretentious way. We do have another steak metaphor. You'll be happy to know.
Hey-o! So it should be like an air horn sound every time the Steakhouse comes up.
So in time, time, even your editor will love to read what you give them and have little to say. Your steak will hit all the notes that customers will have nothing but a generic "it's delicious" comment on their review. And when that happens, your story should be done. Now that's not a good thing, in my opinion, right? Because if you don't want to go into this restaurant and the only thing you can come away from it is, yeah, it's right. Oh, yeah, it's good. You want it to be interesting and different. I mean, it depends on your palate, obviously, but I mean, surely...
But he doesn't want anything to be different, though, does he? He just wants the same shit regurgitated into his mouth every time, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he just he takes the piss, this guy. Because he's talking about... Hang on, let me just read this sentence again. Your steak will hit all the notes. The customers will have no... Hang on, let me say this again. In time, even your editor will love to read what you give them and have little to say. your steak will hit all the notes. The customers will have nothing but a generic, it's delicious. Like, what is he talking about here? Because he thinks that things should be generic, right?
Yeah.
Like he at the start of this section, or was this in the introduction? I can't remember. He was saying, you know, what we should want to give the reader or the audience is what they want. Like, we should want to give them what they want, and that should always be what we want to give them.
Yes.
You know, like he was saying that earlier on, and now he's saying, oh yeah, but if the customers just like it, that's not enough. Like, what?
Yeah, no, I know. It's just like you. Well, no, he wants. No, that's what he wants. I think he wants it to hit all the notes, and that customers will have nothing but a generic "it's delicious" comment, and that's when your story should be done. So he actually does advocate for.
Oh, okay. He's saying that this is right.
Yeah, he's saying it's right that it's generic.
Okay, he's saying earlier on you should get slaughtered. I mean, I'm following his advice. I'm getting slaughtered on this stream, but I don't think that's quite what he meant.
No, I don't think so. No, but it is just. I don't know. I guess I just think it's quite sad, really, that there's someone who genuinely believes that their favourite form of art should just be like boring, or should just be sort of formulaic, or follow the same kind of ideas as other previous works.
Here's one for you, Matt.
Yeah.
What do we think Smudboy's like favourite film is? Like, we've seen a lot of the stuff. Like, I know he's a big fan of Agatha Christie. So I would imagine some of his favourite books. Yeah, no, he is. Yeah, because he's always talking about murder mysteries and shit. Like, okay. He is a big fan of Agatha Christie. I wouldn't want to hazard a guess at which Christie novel is his favourite. But he likes the kind of formula of that, I think. Because as brilliant as Agatha Christie is, there's a formula to her work.
No, for sure. Yeah.
And like, I think that's what he likes about her, is that it's mechanically. You know, it works mechanically in a lot of cases. Although Christie did subvert her own formula quite a bit in later books and stuff, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, like there's that one where everyone did it, right? That's the famous one that
yes,
subverts her
Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although he doesn't like the Kenneth Branagh film adaptation of Murder on the Orient Express for some reason. I can't remember why, but yeah, I wonder what his like favorite film is.
Probably
like, I wonder
like The Dark Knight or something.
But that's quite a subversive film in some ways, isn't it? Like the formula. Smudboy's faith film is Jodorowsky's El Topo from Bubble Boy. I don't think he knows what Jodorowsky is, to be honest. I would love to see him watch El Topo because it'd blow his tiny mind. I don't know if you're aware of El Topo, Matt, but it's a famous surrealist, kind of a Western, but not really. And like Jodorowsky's stuff is fucking weird. Like it's out there, you know.
Yeah.
Think like David Lynch, but like if David Lynch did a load of acid. Like it's that basically.
Brilliant. No, I would love to see him watch a film like that.
Yeah, genuinely, I know we've probably burnt the bridges with Smudboy, but I'd like to go over to Canada. I'd like to crack open an IPA with him, and I'd like to pop on El Topo and just see him dissolve into himself. I just see what he thought of that. I want to just I want to understand where this comes from with him, because I think we've hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of this is his writing was probably criticized as being too generic, so his mentality now is things should be generic.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is just sort of bitterness from sort of taking criticism back.
He likes a lot of stuff that is kind of subversive though, because he likes like Harlan Ellison and stuff like that, and Ellison's very like subversive in his writing and stuff. Yeah. And you know, there's often bizarre twists of reality in his work. So it's weird, isn't it? Because he likes Watchmen as well. So I don't really know what his deal is.
Yeah, well, he likes Watchmen, but he completely missed the point of it because he thinks it's apolitical. Yeah. And I think at some point during that stream that I watched, he said that Rorschach is the cool guy, even though like Alan Moore explicitly said that Rorschach is designed to be a loser.
Yeah, and to be clear, like I think you could level the criticism at Alan Moore that like Rorschach kind of is the cool guy, but like I would view that as a criticism rather than.
Yeah, like it may have been the intention, but maybe he didn't write it as clearly as.
Yes, because like I don't like to be clear. I don't think Rorschach is like a hero by any stretch of the imagination, but he also ends up kind of being the character with the most dignity is not the right word. with the most integrity at the end, because he's willing to die rather than compromise with Ozymandias, right? So it's kind of like, I mean, I personally read that scene as like having an irony to it, that Rorschach in his last moments is kind of noble. Like, I don't think that's supposed to be your entire takeaway of Rorschach. I think it's supposed to be a complicated character.
Yeah.
And like, you're supposed to kind of go like, well, he is a complete arsehole in almost every other regard.
Yeah.
But like, that strange, because I think that's something that Moore is interested in, right? Is exploring those contradictions in characters. And that thing's, that thing of Rorschach being this kind of, the psychopath, really, this kind of right-wing nutter who lives on his own and just is completely antisocial and doesn't fit into the world. Like, I think it's supposed to be an ironic moment in some ways, like a tragically ironic moment.
Yeah.
That he's the only one who will stand up against Adrian Veidt at the end. The others just kind of accept it for various reasons. Whereas he's like, no, I won't compromise on this. And that's the thing that makes him kind of a villain for the rest of the story. But in that moment, there's a strange nobility to it. Like, it's very movingly written, and I think there is empathy for Rorschach.
Yeah.
Because you could also read that scene, because he's going to Dr. Manhattan, right? He's going like, just do it, just kill me. You could read it as him like not being able to actually deal with what he knows has happened, right? You could read it as like, this entire story he's been going, the end is nigh, doom is upon us. But then when he witnesses the doom, when he sees the loss of human life, all his bullshit about, I don't like people, I'm a misanthrope, all of that just kind of fizzles away. And he has that weird pang of like he can't live with it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's almost like it's a very complex and well-written story that just going, it's a hero, it's a villain, doesn't quite work for, you know.
Well, the thing we've established more than once is that Smudboy does not understand complexity or nuance at all in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, Mr. Man 991. There are plenty of people who like Starship Troopers who don't realize it's satire of fascism. Maybe there's an element of that to it. Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah. Interestingly, Carl Benjamin, aka Sargon of Akkad, he's a big fan of Starship Troopers and thinks that we should model our society on it.
Oh, so just fascism, just open fascism.
Yeah, just a cheeky bit of fascism, yeah.
Brilliant. So we've got, moving on, we've got bonus unwritten rule 2. So this is the last rule, and the rest of the book we can sort of skip through slightly quicker than we have been. So it does open with 6 + 1 is a lot of rules, and here's one more.
7 is what he means. 7 is a lot of rules.
Yeah, 7 is I can't ever see a time when any of these rules should be broken.
Well, we've already listed so many examples where they are broken that
yes,
I think we can just ignore that.
Later on he says, while I think the above rules can never really be broken, I'm not infallible in my understanding, e.g. fourth wall breaking techniques. There may be rules that override the other rules in some capacity. Some styles, like a stream of consciousness, certainly throw away rule 6 for the purpose of expression. Does that make a story? Perhaps. But does it make a story others would want to read or could attempt to read? And then here we bring back Joyce, where he says, I'm looking at you, Finnegan's Wake.
Okay, so he has tried to read Joyce. I forgot that.
Yeah.
And clearly just didn't get it. And that's fine. Plenty of people don't like Joyce. You don't have to like Joyce. It's fine. But to imply that no one would ever want to read that is just objectively wrong. It's just wrong. Like, it's just not correct. Because people do read Joyce and enjoy it and get something out of it. You know? What a fool.
Yeah. It's just that he says that the rules should never be broken.
Yes.
And he says that if they are broken, they make objectively bad stories.
But then look, he goes on in the next paragraph to say no rules can ever withstand the complexity of human imagination.
Yeah.
So, oh, God.
But you must have a master to show you the way. As in, I think he's sort of thinking of himself as the master teaching the...
like I said, he's been among the hooded monks of narrative.
Yeah, the Illuminati of story.
And like Prometheus, he is gifting us mere mortals with the gift of fire.
Yes. So that's all I had to say about that, because it's not very interesting. Then we've got the premise. So now on chapter 2. So now we can basically just skip through. So he does talk about Star Wars. So he says the premise is the philosophy or idea of the story. Star Wars has the White Knight versus the Black Knight in space, which...
Yes.
I mean, sort of, but also, like, famously, Star Wars was modelled after westerns and Flash Gordon, not cartoons, serials.
Sorry to interrupt, but Pike L, referencing one of my favourite dickheads, when Critical Drinker, another quote-unquote objective critic, reviewed The Lighthouse, he outright stated he didn't know how to criticise it because he can't find plot holes in there. Yeah, and this is kind of the issue, isn't it? Like, they only look for plot holes, whereas something like The Lighthouse is such an abstract experience in some ways.
Yeah.
That plot holes are kind of besides the point. Like, you know, yeah.
That's
so
wild
much
that someone would actually think that.
Have you seen The Lighthouse?
I've seen The Lighthouse, yeah. I just can't imagine anyone would sort of go into it and think, okay, where are the plot holes in this shit? And let's put this on YouTube.
I think that's how he watches every film, though, in fairness, The Critical Drinker. I think that's how he watches all films. Like,
I don't actually know who this person is. I know you mentioned that... has he written a book or something?
Oh, interesting. He loved it. Okay. That surprises me. Okay. I've not seen his review of The Lighthouse, but that's really interesting to me. Okay. I'll check that out. Bubble Boy, how much would I have to pay to get Smud Boy to do a stream reading and analysing all of Ulysses? I don't know, but let's make it happen. Because he's got Patreon tiers, right? So where you can suggest content.
Oh, one of his Patreon tiers is he'll play a game of League of Legends with you.
So let's get on LOL with him and let's suggest Ulysses. Yeah, and Celestial Sitcom, yeah, The Lighthouse is the mermaid vagina movie. Yes. There is a great bit in that movie where you see, to be fair, it's supposed to be the imagination of Robert Pattinson's character. But yes, he turns over a dead mermaid and she's got a pussy.
Okay.
And it's, well, me and Mrs. Henchbrain, when we went to see it at the art house cinema near us, we pissed ourselves laughing at that. The middle-aged art house crowd kind of tutted at us a bit, which you know, standard experience. Sorry, go on.
Okay, so we have got more discussion of objective criticism. So it does go on to say, an objective critic who is versed in romance fiction may see your characters as shallow, unbelievable, or overly romanticized. Thus, a premise must first be able to adhere to genre or subgenre criteria and either match or surpass all of its requirements, or, in creating serialized stories, naturally create their own subgenre, e.g. Star Wars, James Bond, Harry Potter, etc. So basically, well, obviously we're bringing in the objectivity stuff, but he's going on about how, like, you have to like have a list of things that have to be in a specific genre or kind of story, and then like if you don't follow that exact structure, it's shit. Like,
Matt, I regret to inform you that. Oh, hello. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. You went a bit weird for a sec, but yeah.
Okay, well, there's technical difficulties happening, but I regret to inform you.
Oh. Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, you're roboting a bit.
Okay, can you hear me though?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I need to have a piss.
Okay.
So I'm going to go and do that. You entertain the crowd.
Okay.
Discuss Smudboy or mermaid vaginas, and I'll be back in a jiffy. In a jiffy, sir.
Okay, fair enough. So, Bubba Boy, if his objective criteria is based around genre, if you create your own subgenre of the work, does that work then become objectively perfect? The answer is yes. So the way, I'm sure you're aware of this, but the way these people do sort of claim that they can objectively criticize something is that they create their own version of what they think the perfect story is, and then everything that exists within that is then sort of judged within their criteria. So I think Shadiversity did a video about this where basically he said, yes, technically, like, every movie is subjective. However, you can put an objective framework on it and then criticize it within that framework. So I think the example he gave was he likes swords, and so every movie that has historically accurate swords in, to him, is objectively better than movies that don't have historically accurate swords or whatever sort of shit in them. So basically, yes. Obviously, they missed the point that if you put a subjective framework on something and then objectively criticize something within that subjective framework, it's still subjective. But they do basically think that that based on whatever criteria they've got, that if it fits all of their criteria, which again are basically just completely arbitrary, that it just does make a work either objectively good or objectively bad, which is how they can justify something like The Last Jedi is objectively bad, despite obviously the fact that there's a lot of people that do like it and there's a lot of people who also hate it. It's wild. I don't really get it, to be perfectly honest with you. But then again, I never really understood like why these people don't just accept that a movie they like is like okay, or that a movie they don't like there are people out there who will like it, and that their opinion isn't necessarily the best or the only one. It's just a very strange idea and ideology, to be honest with you. This is sort of, I mean, I was going to make a video about it, but honestly, Patricia Taxon made a great video about it that I don't think I could really surpass. And I basically, if I did it, I'd just be repeating her point. So I'd recommend that you go check that out. Why call it objective in the first place? Basically because they like to suck their own dicks about how intelligent they are. So they do tend to sort of claim that they're objectively correct, even though basically everything they talk about is just their subjective opinion, because they just like the sound of their own voice, and they really, really love to act like they're, you know, the unquestioned geniuses and everyone else is just wrong. No, my opinion is the objective truth of reality. Again, yeah, that is basically the ideology of someone like Morla or Smudboy. Essentially, they can say that their opinion is based on, you know, any number of things, but basically it's...
Yo.
Hello, I was just discussing the concept of objectivity.
Oh right, yeah, okay. Were you saying about Patricia Taxon's video about it?
Yeah, I was basically saying that I was considering making a video about it, but honestly, Patricia Taxon's video about it is better than anything I could make. So I just recommend people watch that.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. Yeah, Celestial Storm. Can I actually challenge the idea that art is entirely subjective? If this is the case, why are there movies that I agree are bad, but at the same time I really enjoy them? I mean, this speaks to the subjectivity of the viewer, though, right? Because you're looking at a film and going, by all my usual metrics, this is bad. So I take The Room, for example. You might look at that and go, it's badly shot, it's badly written, it's badly acted, but many people get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So on that level, can you really say it's a bad film?
And also, obviously, there's the difference of like what the purpose of a work of art is, right? You can say, oh, you didn't enjoy something, but you know, something like a horror film, for example, like the point of that may not necessarily be to enjoy it so much as to be frightened, or you know, the movies that will question your view of reality, and like that's sort of the point of that movie, and it's not necessarily always about, you know, enjoying it.
Yeah. I agree with Mr. Mann. There's also a Venn diagram of good and entertaining. Films don't have to be either, but there should be one. It's kind of it's a good point, isn't it? Because what we consider entertaining and what we consider to be, you know, good in the more existential sense of the term is obviously not always the same. As Sheep/Matt knows, there are plenty of films that are utter trash that I genuinely love.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like, obviously, Mr. Mann, you give the example of Schindler's List, which is obviously not like a fun watch, but is a very good work of art. You know, so it's like, well, art doesn't necessarily have to be enjoyable. I would argue that one of the major points of art is to question our preconceptions and to challenge us, which does mean that it's not enjoyable a lot of the time.
Yeah, yeah. That's an interesting point. Pike L, you'll here might disagree with them being good in the first place, but I think that the objective critic squad would be 100 times better if EFAP didn't exist. I actually am going to support that notion. I think EFAP really, really poisons the well, because they are the ones who have contributed to being such a, I don't want to say tribal, but that kind of thing of like, it's so polarized now, if you see what I mean, because of EFAP. Yeah. And like Smudboy is definitely a follower of EFAP, an add-on to EFAP, Frankly, it's annoying that Mauler hasn't written a book, because I think it'd be much more interesting to cover than Smudboy's ramblings, but there you go.
Yeah, no, I agree, because obviously Smudboy is basically just a Mauler hanger on, essentially. Yeah. But whereas Mauler is essentially I don't know if he's not really the originator of this idea, but he's the one who really popularized it in modern times of objective film criticism. So I think a book from him, even if it's like something like this, or if it's a fiction book, I think would be interesting, because obviously then we'd be able to criticize it based on his own conceptions and ideas with regards to his own work and what he says about other people's work.
God, imagine how long a Mauler book would be, though. At least 1,000 pages.
For sure, yeah. And the first 90% of it would just be summarizing the story.
Yeah. Just, I mean, Mauler is someone who part of me wants to cover on here, but part of me just knows I don't have the energy to watch all his fucking streams.
Oh no, I refuse to. It's just that I really can't be asked to do that. That's not going to be. It's not going to. I haven't even watched all of the streams people have made about me. I can't bring myself to actually watch something about something I don't care about.
Yeah, and his video, I got halfway through his series on, I think The Force Awakens. And literally by episode 3 or whatever, it was still Mauler, just summarizing the film. It's just okay, I've seen it. Assume that I've seen it. That's probably the best way to go. To be clear, obviously, if you're doing a video essay or whatever, you do need to kind of go, in this scene, so-and-so does this thing and blah, blah, blah. And then kind of expand on that from there. But people like Lindsay Ellis, for example, they do that. They will summarize the film to some extent, all the relevant parts to make their point. I mean, the other thing that Lindsay Ellis does is just play the clip that she's talking about.
I don't know why he doesn't just do that, honestly.
Because he does have footage rolling over what he's saying.
Yeah, most of the time it's video game footage, though.
No, with Mauler, to be fair, he does use Star Wars clips, but it's kind of, or clips from the film he's talking about, but it's not generally the scene that he's really discussing. It's bizarre. It's a bizarre editing choice.
No.
But yeah, he's Mauler is his own thing.
So I just so just bringing back to the book, I just want to point out Smudboy's example of what genre should be. So the genre is science fiction, which is always about man versus technology.
It's never about anything else.
Never about anything else. The subgenre, the space opera, which is always about militaristic spaceship battles or melodrama. And then we've got the series of Star Wars, which is apparently its own unique genre, which is good versus evil philosophy, lightsaber fighting, supernatural.
Yeah, because Star Wars and science fiction are two different things. I guess what he's saying is, genre, subgenre, series, right? So
he's saying the series falls within the subgenre and the subgenre falls within the genre, but even so.
Yeah, it doesn't really work, because Star Wars isn't about man versus technology in any way, really.
No,
I know that there's some subtext to A New Hope in particular about not relying on technology and stuff. There is certainly that you could read into it. Yeah, but I wouldn't say that that's a theme of the entire film.
No,
I mean the entire series. Because obviously, people like to cite because I've seen people argue about A New Hope, saying it's there is a theme of kind of new agey philosophy about not relying on technology, because obviously Darth Vader is more machine than man, as Obi-Wan says, and the Force is this living energy that we all create, and at the end, of course, the climactic scene is Luke not using the targeting device, but but using the Force to destroy the Death Star. So, yes, there's certainly some thematic stuff there that you could dig into about man versus technology, but to say that is the theme of Star Wars as a whole is a madness. Because, I mean, as much as there is a theme of Star Wars as a whole, it's surely fascism versus anti-fascism, right?
Yeah, no, you'd have thought. So later on, he does then clarify, you don't want to write within a genre if you're not prepared to meet its requirements. So, I mean, we talked a lot about genre, but it's just sort of like that kind of declarative statement does just sort of get to me, really, because it does sort of imply that you can't, play with genres or do cross genres or sort of really step outside the box at all.
The example of a subgenre he gives is kind of a post hoc genre where they're saying like, oh, it's a science fiction story, kind of to like these like broad capital R romantic ideas, right?
Yeah.
Because space opera isn't really a genre. It's kind of like something that it's kind of like folk horror, right? It's kind of applied after the fact, where people kind of went like, oh, there's a lot of instances of, in this case, a science fiction stories or a story set piece that kind of has this broad melodramatic capital R romantic vibe to it. And they went, oh, well, space opera, that's how we can classify that.
Yeah, so it's like genre a lot of the time isn't something that people deliberately write within. A lot of the time it's something that people will apply to a work after it's been created, much like stuff like the hero's journey and things like that. That's something that's generally applied to stories way after the fact.
Yeah, and there's so many things that could be considered science fiction that don't kind of apply to what Smud's saying about like, oh, it has to be about technology, right? Because again, I'm pulling obscure examples, I guess, and that's something that Smud criticizes people like us for, but fuck it. So there's like a movie that I'm thinking of called Upstream Color, which is great, by the way. Everyone should watch it. Where like the film is just basically about like this parasitic virus that takes over this couple, and it's kind of like about their relationship, and there's like some metaphor in there about like toxic relationships, right? But yeah, that's a science fiction story on the face of it because it's not a real parasite that exists. So it is like something that they've made up as a fantasy for the story. But it's not about technology. And it's still, but I would still classify that as science fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's the thing is that these sort of ideas of genre are very